Hey guys, Matthew with Parkway Business Solutions, bringing you a special video. This was a live demonstration that my business partner and I did with Knowify. Now, we've been using Knowify for quite some time, but we wanted to get kind of a refresher course, especially with a lot of the new features that they've had coming out lately. So we'll jump right into it. Hope you enjoy it.
Changed a lot since we started.
Yeah, absolutely. If not, I mean, obviously the contracts I think have still remained the same. The big difference is, you choose it when you're starting the job. Essentially, it's a user interface change that we had to make because so many people, would start the job and get confused as to, what type of contract to use, and I think it ended up being a little overly daunting when they're trying to create the job. You start with these simple steps, and then all of a sudden there's a billion other steps just to get started. This way you just make all the decisions up front, and then once you lay it out, we actually will kind of guide you through the process of setting up a job way easier.
Interesting, okay.
And so, I mean, basically what you're doing here is just choosing your contract style. We actually remember whatever your last choice was, so you can you don't have to redo them every time. You don't have to reselect every time for what it's worth. But I'll just do a quick breakdown of what the different items are here. And so the first one here, owner contract, just creates these fixed price contracts, and you'll bill it, it'll be a progress billing situation, kind of like an AIA, but there's no retainage. It's all just billed on percentage of completion, and you'll go through the project fixed price. You can submit your change orders if you need to.
Right.
GCBit works very similarly. The big difference here is that we have the ability to calculate retainage for you and output AIA-style invoice documents. So for subcontractors that are working on a commercial GC and they need to submit those G702s, I don't know if you guys see them very often, but we'll automatically create the document for you. It's actually a huge time saver, and we find that people are a big fan of this.
Neat.
Maintenance contracts are a little bit more specific. This is going to be for companies that have recurring services. It's big in landscaping, actually.
Right.
We also find, a lot of HVAC guys and fire protection guys like to have a recurring, maintenance inspection as well. And so what this does is it essentially sets up recurring, monthly dispatch ticket, and you can invoice as you go, and it'll track all of your profit and loss, not just on each individual ticket, but on the contract on a whole. And the last option is this other agreement, and that's really just where our custom billing comes in. So if you need to set up a cost plus or time materials job, or something that's, we'll say, oh well, we don't bill as a fixed price, we bill per square foot, then we can set that up in these types of contracts as well. What I'll show you is our owner contract, just because it's the simplest, it's our bread and butter, just give you an idea of how the system works. But the next big change we've made, I don't know if you've seen a demo since we added this, Mike, but what we essentially have laid out is what we refer to as our job costing style. And job costing style is all about controlling how the flow of Knowify works. And so we had a lot of people who, they weren't into creating a budget before they start the job. They want to just jump right in and create a contract.
Right.
So in simple mode and advanced mode, that's what we do in Knowify. The difference between simple and advanced is that in simple mode, you just track your cost to the job, end of story. In advanced, you track it to the line items that you've quoted to the client within the job. So you can get a little bit better for profit and loss breakdown.
So the simple actually bypasses a little bit the plan and track phase of Knowify.
Yeah, so basically the way simple works is rather than creating a whole plan and track section, it just does one phase. It's called labor and materials, and you track all of your labor and materials to it.
Got it.
Exactly. And we find a lot of people are actually very interested in this because when you first start on Knowify, it can get kind of daunting organizing and allocating your costs. And so simple mode is kind of the continue the way you're doing things now mode, only we'll organize it a little bit better for you.
Right.
And so advanced mode essentially does the same thing, only instead of creating one phase called labor and materials, we create a phase for every line item you created in the document. And there's no budgeted cost, you just track all of your actual costs directly to these.
Got it.
The last one last style here is professional, and this is the one I'm going to show you. And this is kind of classic Knowify as you would know it, where what we're going to do is start by creating a project plan and estimating our cost, and then we'll use that project plan to create the contract and track all of our actual costs against it.
Right.
The last thing I'll do here is just set a site address. A lot of these are some other features we just released, like sales lead and project manager, if you want to have that on file. A lot of people were just saying these are kind of just in-process options. Same with job color. You know, we have it available now, but it'll have more significance with future updates where, you know, job color is going to be because we have this incredible scheduling application that we're adding into Knowify where you'll be able to you know, see all of your open jobs on kind of a Gantt type of view where it's a job board and you just choose, the person choose the job and it schedules everyone. And then, you know, if you want to, a lot of people will have the request, I want my project managers to only see the jobs they're scheduled on. So, you know, we have the ability to set a project manager and, you know, you can see it like that. A lot of it's also good for reports. So we just want to have this information on file.
That's smart.
And so we're going to set a site address to this. That'll just allow us to use the mobile time tracker when we're, you know, doing the labor cost of this job. But since I use professional mode, it pulls me right into the plan and track section of this job. This is where I'm going to lay out all of my phases and, you know, estimate all of my costs on this job so I get a better idea of how much I'll probably end up spending before I quote any prices to the client.
Right.
So I'll start by adding a job phase. I'm going to go super vague with this one just so you can see the basic functions of what we do. So I'll call it phase 1, and for each phase we want to write in an estimated material and labor budget. And we have the option to do the classic lump sum, you know, $2,300, but you know, one of the more powerful functions in Knowify is the ability to write out an itemized list of the materials and make your estimated cost like that. So I could say, you know, I'll need some lumber, and I need, you know, 230 studs, and I might need some plywood, I'll call it OSB, and we'll need 200 sheets of this, and I need some nails, and we can create this budgeted list just so my materials budget is a little bit more accurate than it would have been. So, you know, this ended up being a little bit above what I initially estimated. Now I know that I'm not going to end up losing money just because I decided I want to go with a lump sum on this. For our labor budget, we do something similar, only instead of referencing items in the catalog, we reference employees in our system. So I have the option to say, I want Ringo on this for 40 hours, and it automatically just says, you know, 40 hours at the hourly cost we have in our system for him, this is our labor budget. But since, you know, you don't always know who's available when you're in this, you know, scheduling part of the job, we also have the ability to say, some laborer for 80 hours, and it brings in the average hourly cost of all of my laborers. I can even say, you know, well, let's call it, you know, 29. It'll probably be a little bit pricier than our average this time. And now I have just a labor budget based off of, you know, the raw labor hours that I'm going to need to get this done. And then I'll also throw a foreman on this job just because a lot of times we want to have a foreman tracking time for these guys, and so this will budget to have him on site as well. So I'll add another job phase here. What I'm going to do here, instead of doing this whole manual entry like I did before, is use these service templates. This is another new feature we added not too long ago, where you have the ability to say, you know, we're probably going to have to do some exterior painting, and it'll say, how many square yards of painting are you going to have to do? I'll say 800, confirm. And we have this assembly in our catalog that our plan can reference and automatically populate the labor and material budget based off of these custom units we set up.
Neat.
So, yeah, and just I can say, you know, phase 2, exterior painting, and that way if you have, you know, the majority of the services you offer set up in your catalog, then making a project plan is such a nominal amount of time because you just say, you know, service template, this many units, service template, this many units, and it automatically populates all of this.
Real quickly,
So
on the service templates, real quickly, is that something you guys have already created and are continuing to add on to, or is that something the user creates their own catalog?
This is something that the user creates, obviously, because everyone likes to budget differently. So, you know, it's not really something we would feel comfortable jumping in and doing for people. But just to give you an idea of how it works, you add a service, you call it a template, and I'll say new service. This description is just this first description is just for the sake of more information for you, but the default work order actually will drop into the plan. You see we have add work order, and we have a default come in here, and I can change it if I need to. Latex, red paint. And this work order actually serves two different purposes. The first of which is it'll automatically show up on someone's phone if they're scheduled to work on this phase. But it'll also automatically drop into the contract if you wanted to, so you can give a better description of what phase 2 includes. And so essentially what you do to create one of these assemblies is you write in your unit name. It'll say, how much do you generally charge per unit? We can say $100. And it'll say, and we need 10 foreman hours per unit, and 20 labor hours per unit, and I can reference my materials catalog. I need 10 sheets of drywall, 5 electrical outlets. I have no clue what this wonky service is, but essentially that's how it sets it up. So whenever you want to reference this, you can just type in, new service, and it says, all right, how many units are there? And obviously it's whatever you set up as the unit here. And you put it in, and it just automatically knows to reference this section and drop all that in for you.
Kind of an advanced question on this. For that type of feature, do you have the ability to import or export these at all? So
what we can do is import Excel sheets for you.
Perfect.
And so, it's obviously limited to a couple. These things end up having to be limited because, there is no Excel sheet that can replicate, the different labor and number of hours per unit. It would have to be laid out specifically for us to import it perfectly. But if all you really want is to import, a cost estimate, you can even do that with a product. If you send us, painting, like an Excel sheet that has painting cost estimate, and then just write in what you cost out per unit. We expect it to cost us $50 per square foot. We can upload all of these into your catalog easily. And granted, the problem with you doing it as a product is that it'll all come in as a labor cost. But if all you're concentrated on is raw costs, raw estimated versus actual cost, this will still track it all for you. It's not going to give you the accurate labor versus estimated cost, but if you want to see the overall, that's how we can set this up really easily with an Excel sheet.
Okay.
So it's interesting to me on this screen that you've got that in Add New Service, it seems like that's a combined deal. Like Add New Product, a catalog, like per item type concept, but then Add New Service seems to be like not just labor, but a material labor, I guess, conjunction, sort of like meeting of the ways. It's almost like in QuickBooks where you've got group items or
it's like a build
assembly.
almost.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is that what you guys just tried to do there?
Yeah, it's kind of something that we're, I wouldn't say copying, but it's obviously an influence. It's something that we consider. In my experience, the majority of people's estimating sheets don't break out labor and material costs. They just have, this is our overall cost. And so that's why I was saying, we can import it, but then obviously we're not going to be able to assign a labor and material cost to it because the person who sent us the Excel sheet didn't assign labor and material costs to it.
The reason I was asking that question before was it was actually, again, more advanced concept, but the idea of like community-based sharing. Obviously, every business is completely different, but I know there's a lot of small businesses out there that maybe if they had the ability to get the structure from other people and they were sharing the ideas, it might help them in the setup of Knowify.
It's something we've discussed in the past. Maybe if not specifically for these service templates for product databases, where if we're going to have them be the same within different companies, We've discussed the possibility of having maybe a big supplier that a lot of them are using, you know, ABC, Home Depot, whoever it may end up being, you know, give us the option to give them the option to reference, you know, their products in our catalog, so they can automatically load that stuff up if they don't want their own catalog. And so the idea of adding in full service templates is really not that crazy to us. You know, we're happy to consider something like that. And, you know, we'd be psyched to see that people are using service templates to the extent that people are willing to share them and trade them and have kind of similar ideas.
Nice. Cool. Well, I think Matt hit on what I was wondering too, is basically what those service templates look like. So we could probably go back to.
Yeah, I just wanted to show you, you know, how they're built, because obviously that's a huge difference. Just to get an idea of how it works. We can also break down phases into tasks. I'm just going to be, again, super simple with this just to get the idea across, but this way we can divide up our labor into, you know, more specific locations in the job, and that way these can also serve as kind of second-level work orders where you can tell your worker, yeah, you know you're working on this specific phase, but you know what you're doing there, and so you can assign specific tasks to them as well. And these also have the ability to be marked as complete from the mobile app, so you can get a real-time idea of what the current status of your job is while you work through these.
And can these become, can you memorize or save these also to where if you create a structure for your job, you know you're always going to have these 5 tasks in this type of a phase, that as you build one of these out, you can just, you know, copy, paste, repeat, you know, for different clients?
So what we actually have, you see this use plan as template option. That's what you do, is you save the entire project plan with all the values, names, everything you see here, and you can start a new project and reference this project plan. So I could say 123 Avenue A demonstration, and it'll automatically pull in all of my phases, tasks, and, you know, quantities that I had on that job. So I can, you know, I don't have to start from scratch every time.
Cool.
And the last phase I'll add is going to be a subcontractor phase. I'll just say, you know, phase 3, sub work. And for these, our estimating is pretty basic right now. You know, we have some workarounds to get it a little bit more complex, but the basic idea is that, you know, I'll just put in 6,700 because when they quote a price to me, they're not going to break it down quite as much. They're just going to give us a lump sum, and that's our contract value.
Quick question on the templates here. We have used plan template, and I know that you know, the other aspect you just showed us from the catalog is sort of a build-in for a specific phase. Can you use a phase as a template?
Yeah, so I mean, that's what we created with the service template. I mean, it still prompts you for units, but yeah, that's what we're essentially accomplishing there.
Okay. I guess what the distinction I was trying to make there is, like, because Matt had asked about the task concept in the phase, and I don't think that the tasks could necessarily be added to the service item.
Right.
But if a phase with tasks could be
tasks
template.
Can't be added to the service template yet, although it's something that we've considered and may have to add in the future.
Okay.
Yeah, I was kind of pitching around in my head the idea of if we could have, you know, a grand template that, you know, when you start a plan and track, you write in the number of units and it lays out several phases for you, you know, referencing all of those. But,
right.
You know, this ends up being a heavy load on, you know, both the individual accounts and also, you know, our tech team, and so it's not something that we can do immediately, but it's, you know, all stuff that we have in the pipeline.
I mean, it's not hard for somebody to create a fake job and just hold that fake job that they can always pull the parts from.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I generally recommend that people do that to start off when they create an account and just build a template. You know, it's a great way to learn how to build a job and use it in Knowify, and it's also just a good way to you know, have something that you can use for future reference, just save you a lot of time.
Cool.
So since we're using professional mode, we're going to reference all these estimated costs we put together when we're creating the contract here. And you see, we have used project plan phases set up, so when I hit continue, phases 1 through 3 automatically pull in as line items on this document for me. So I can say, who am I sending this to? That's my client's name. Here's the contract number. We can add estimated start and end dates to this as well. So I could say, we expect to get started today, and we'll be done, mid-August. And then, at our most basic level, you can just say, phase 1, I charge $9,000. But we have added the ability to say, for phase 1, we want a 50% markup on labor. And we can actually even say, apply that to everything, and it just quotes all my prices that easily. I can also divide it up and say, and a 40% for materials, do that for all materials. And then even still, I can edit these if I need to. So I can say, call it $9,900. I don't want them to see the extra $2. I'll call this, $14,800. And we can just make these flatter prices, because I know a lot of these guys want to quote something that looks a little bit nicer to the client, so they don't have to see all these dollars and cents.
Cool.
And then we can also bring in a breakdown of materials directly from the plan. So a lot of these guys like to include this on their projects. I think it's a little bit bigger with commercial, or maybe, for the solar guys, this actually might be a little bit more relevant. I know a lot of security companies that use us like to have this bill of materials included as well. So you could say, this is what I'm installing, and it ends up justifying the price a little bit better. And so I marked off a couple of taxable items, and you'll see that I can now write in my tax rate, and it automatically adds it to the contract sum. You'll see my terms and conditions automatically will actually populate in here, so I don't have to retype them every time. And all this is working towards creating a contract, our proposal that we're going to send out to the client. And it's all done through our system. We create the PDF for you. And what you're going to see here is actually Knowify's stock proposal template.
Quick question on the proposal. Something that I noticed kind of vanished when I was working in the last proposal that I did. Where do we receive deposits?
So if that's it did vanish. We actually removed that feature temporarily because not many people were using it, and the people who were using it were actually looking for something different than, what they actually wanted was a down payment. They were calling it a deposit because that's generally how it's referred to.
Sure.
But, they had no intention of crediting it back, so it wasn't exactly a deposit. It was more of a, give us this money upon signing, and we'll keep it from there. If you'd like, we actually can enable the deposits in your account for you if you intend on using them as like a security deposit type of situation where you're going to credit them back. Otherwise, I would recommend that you just create, if it is a down payment and you're going to just bill moving forward, off of that deposit, you can just set up a line item that's called deposit, and it can be separate from the rest of the project plan if you need to. It doesn't need to be in your plan and track section or anything. And then that way you have a line item, and you can create an invoice for it right upon signing and all of that.
The only question I would have with that is with the deposit that way, is that going to show as money in the door on the accounting side of it at that time? If it's a line item, do line items get closed out at that time?
So if you set it up as a line item, essentially what you'll do is invoice it as soon as the as the project, and that's how it'll be shown as money in the door.
Thank you.
The way the old deposits work is when you sign, as soon as you make the contract active, it automatically makes that invoice for you.
Okay.
Really quickly on that. So if you're saying a line item at the proposal level, doesn't that increase the total of the proposal? Or are you saying like a zero value line item with like 9,000?
No, so yeah, it does increase the value of the proposal because it's saying, this is how, it would be an additional item. The other option, if you have like in your terms that you're going to send them a invoice upon the start of the project for 50% of the total value, then you can set up an invoice that takes 50% out of each of these items, and you can call it deposit, and then it's going to decrease the value of your line items moving forward. The reason this ends up getting shaky is then when you send out the invoice for each of these items, the value per each line item is going to be altered, and you might get a little bit of confusion on that. In our experience, people who do their deposits like that generally just have these individual line item values hidden before, and all they ever show is totals. So when they see the deposit value, it doesn't seem like when they see the value of each individual line item, it doesn't seem like they're under or overcharging anyone. It's just, okay, well, that's how much they're billing me for all of this work up to this point, if that makes sense.
Got it.
And so once we have this, I forgot to mention, so what you're seeing here is actually just the stock Knowify template. What we offer as a complimentary service is the ability to customize these templates. It has to be done on our end, but it is something that we're happy to do for free once you start a subscription with us. So we can do all kinds of neat stuff. Move values around, change some fonts if necessary, add watermarks for people who like to see that kind of stuff. And then, our system will print it out using, our system in your style.
A very important question I'm just going to touch base on, but we can come back to it later, is based on this, is the ability to add an image or multiple images to a quote or an estimate.
So we can add images to a proposal. It's kind of a hidden feature that we haven't really tested very much, so we don't really recommend it. What we likely will add is the ability to add a JPEG along with the email that goes out for e-signature. But formatting images to drop directly onto the contract can be a little tricky because we don't know what size to make them, and we don't know how to put this stuff in. That involves a whole separate piece of software. But technically, and I'll see if I have something I can use as an example. Oh man, you guys are going to see my headshot because I have to do a webinar tonight, and so they asked for a picture of me. But basically, you can drop something in here, and then it'll be included as part of the contract. It's a...
What a handsome guy.
My screen just went blank, like it broke or something.
Oh man, yeah, I wouldn't say I haven't heard that one before. Somewhere my dad's cracking up right now.
Exactly. Nice comeback.
Yeah, so you can drop stuff on, but let's see if it'll show up in here. And then there you go. There's me in my suit. But all the formatting obviously needs to be done in a separate software so it comes in the right size.
Okay. That's
kind of why we don't recommend that you use this, but if it's something that's super important, it is available.
Okay.
So let me get this going.
Part of our goal with that question has to do with interior design, but I wanted to bring that up more specifically at the end of your presentation. So definitely liking your flow through this. So once you're done, we definitely have some more questions if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. So what I'm going to show you here now is just our e-signature process, just so you can see what the client sees when you use the e-signature. You can customize the email that goes out with the e-signature if you want to. You can view the document before it's sent out. I'll go send email. And essentially what we do is we store this in your system. It's an alpha signature job. That just means that you're in the bidding stage. You shouldn't be doing too much planning with this because it hasn't even been approved yet. And so here's my job. It's alpha signature. If they haven't answered in a while, we just added this send reminder button. Or if they just send you an email or called you, you can make it active or reject it, on your own without having to do anything too technical. Client gets this email and it has your company name, the project name, and it has the link to sign the document. And so, they get to view whatever you're printing out here. They're so impressed with what you've done that, I go to my client, Mark, the client is going to sign this, and the e-signature, since it's done through Knowify with a little Knowify portal, it comes right back to your job and switches it from out for signature to active, since it's all on our servers. So now we have this active project, and what I'm going to do is go back to my plan and track section where we budgeted out all of our costs, and I'm going to track all of my actual costs versus my budgets. First, I'll schedule out some of these phases. I'll say this takes about a week. I can come in here and say, this will start when the other one finishes and take a little bit longer than that. And we can divide up tasks into individual dates too, and do our subcontractor guys. But this is also where I'll schedule in my individual workers. And so I'll say, schedule resource. I want John on this for 40 hours. But since we don't always know who's available, we can come into our scheduling app and see who is already scheduled onto Knowify jobs in my system. So I can see John's actually pretty booked up on Wednesday. Let's see, that job's not so important. I'll unschedule from that, and now he's going to be put on this instead. And so this is just the basic scheduler. We might even do away with some of these screens since they're a little bit, the entry on these isn't the most user friendly. Like I said, we're going to essentially set it up differently, where instead of you see each person's schedule next to them, you see all the jobs here, and you just click this person and then click the job, and it schedules them in automatically.
That's neat.
And so I'll schedule these people in here, and what this does when I have them scheduled on within certain dates is it chooses the dates that these guys can check in and check out on this job using their mobile phone. So as soon as these guys are scheduled in, they can use their phone to do a little check-in, check-out. It works a lot like T-Sheets, and we push the hours directly to QuickBooks if that's how you're doing your payroll.
Wow. And so you say that they have the ability to check in, check out. Does that mean, is there some kind of like time window that they can't check in 2 hours early for a job, or, is it related to time at all?
Basically, they can check in on any job whenever they want. The big difference when you schedule them is it automatically will display within those dates for them.
Okay.
And so, if they want to see what they're supposed to be doing, they can check their mobile app and see, okay, I'm supposed to be working on this one for this many hours on this day.
Does it also happen to like geo-capture where they tag themselves in at that time?
Yeah, absolutely. We pin their location, and then whoever's reviewing their time will get a little red flag that says, hey, just so you know, this guy checked in this many miles from the job site.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and we actually pin their location too, so you can see the specific spot. So, if a guy's late to work and checking in, that's one thing, but if you find him at a bar around the corner, you might want to have a talk with him.
That actually brings up a good question of having your buddy log you in also. I'm sure other owners would think of this also. Is it like, do people register their device, or, hey, I forgot my phone, I need to use my buddy's phone to tag in or something like that? How would that work?
So, obviously we can only limit, we can only give people specific, we can't limit people too much, but what we do is take down the type of phone that they checked in with. So, there are a couple red flags here and there. So if this guy's got an iPhone, he checks in with an Android today, that's one thing you might want to look out for.
That's perfect. Thank you.
The last thing I'll do as far as the scheduling side of this goes is just choose my subcontractor for this phase I set up. Like I say, Johnson Painting Co. is going to do this for, maybe it didn't match, maybe it ended up being $6,500. They got a good deal. And we can upload their contract too, just so we have it on file. And this essentially just sets up a flexible spending purchase order in our system, where to assign the number, 217 here, And we can reference this as we go through the system. Whenever we receive a bill from John Smith Paint & Co., it'll bill against the $6,500 contract, and we can see, how much we owe him as we log each bill. So we have this roughly scheduled out. The next thing I'll do is create a purchase order for all these materials that I budgeted. I'll say order materials, choose the different items, start PO process, and it pulls me out of contract jobs and into my purchases module, where all I really need to do is just choose the vendor, and it'll create a purchase order document right off the bat for me. But I also have the ability to edit these. I could say, I'm actually going to order 150 studs right now, 5 boxes of nails, 100 sheets of OSB, and I'm going to add in an estimated tax rate, shipping costs. And you'll see that since we came in from our contract job, it's automatically pointing this cost at the specific phase of the specific job for the client. And so I know exactly where I'm spending all this money in the purchase order. And then we can set a variety of different payment methods. So in this situation, I'm showing you a purchase order, so I'll leave it as vendor will invoice. We're assuming that we're receiving a bill from the vendor. But if it's something that you pick up with cash or a debit card in the field, you can just mark down, we paid for this with cash, and we push right to QuickBooks how much we owe him as we log each bill. So we have this roughly scheduled out. The next thing I'll do is create a purchase order for all these materials that I budgeted. I'll say order materials, choose the different items, start PO process, and it pulls me out of contract jobs and into my purchases module, where all I really need to do is just choose the vendor, and it'll create a purchase order document right off the bat for me. But I also have the ability to edit these. I could say, I'm actually going to order 150 studs right now, 5 boxes of nails, 100 sheets of OSB, and I'm going to add in an estimated tax rate, shipping costs. And you'll see that since we came in from our contract job, it's automatically pointing this cost at the specific phase of the specific job for the client. And so I know exactly where I'm spending all this money in the purchase order. And then we can set a variety of different payment methods. So in this situation, I'm showing you a purchase order, so I'll leave it as vendor will invoice. We're assuming that we're receiving a bill from the vendor. But if it's something that you pick up with cash or a debit card in the field, you can just mark down, we paid for this with cash, and we push right to QuickBooks as an expense. We don't wait on the bill. And then if it's something that you paid for with a credit card, you can actually mark down what credit card you used, and we'll push it right to the credit card in QuickBooks. So if you have all your credit card transactions automatically sync into your account, this will push to match. So that way, if you have something that you purchased with a credit card, it went right into QuickBooks, and you costed a job in Knowify, it's not going to double log, because it'll then look into QuickBooks and it says, hey, we see this transaction for this vendor for this amount. It looks very similar. Do you want to just cancel them out? And you can match them in QuickBooks.
Interesting. Now, did you guys set up the same concept for the bills area as well?
Well, we do it with I think it should work with bills. I think just about all AP things match in QuickBooks, so I'm not mistaken. So anything we push, you'll be able to confirm. It's the same with if you have a debit card hooked up and it's automatically pulling in stuff with all of your expenses from your debit card, then any expenses you push will automatically match up. So I'll submit this PO, and what this is going to do is create another PO number and create a PO document for me, which I can edit. Maybe I want to use a different address. Maybe I want to include additional comments. Please deliver by 9 a.m. I can, switch the shipping address to the job site instead of my office. I can hide the prices if I need to, and I can email it out directly to the vendor through Knowify. So, we create this document for you, and it can automatically be sent out and, on file in our system.
What if you happen to have, vendors where you're calling in an order and they're actually creating the PO for you? Is there a way to, let's say they send you a copy of the PO, you can attach it and not have to do the double entry?
Yeah, you can edit the purchase order if you want to do that. If it's a situation where they're just, you called it in and they just send you the bill, then you can log just the bill, or if they send you a purchase order and then follow up with a bill, you can log their purchase order in the system. It's however you want to do it.
Okay.
And so now I have these two open purchases in my system. One's actually my contract with the sub, and so I'll start by assuming I received a bill from him on this $6,500 contract. So I'll come to my bills, I'll add a new bill, and I'm going to use that number 217 as reference to pull up the contract and log my bill against it. So I say add new bill. I have the bill has P.O. number option checked. I'll say 217. And Knowify is automatically going to say, yep, this bill's for John Smith Paint to Go. Here's their outstanding contract value. I can put in the invoice number and due date. And I'll edit the unit price to reflect how much they're billing me for at this point. So I'll call it, $4,000. This is the total amount of the bill. And it's going to remove that from the contract for me. What this also does is automatically sends this bill to QuickBooks, a corresponding bill really, where the sync doesn't just stop at sending it over. You can actually use QuickBooks to record payment on this bill, and that'll come back to Knowify and close it out for you. So you never have to double log that kind of information. As soon as you record payment in Knowify, we push it to QuickBooks, or if you record your payment in QuickBooks, we'll put it into Knowify, and everything's going to close out in time. And so you see the new balance of purchase order 217 is now $2,500 instead of $6,000. And now I'll just do one more bill, and this one will be for ABC Supply, where, if it's a company that you're purchasing a lot of materials from, best chances are they're not going to send you one bill per purchase order. So you have the option to say, this bill doesn't have a purchase order number. You'll pull in the name of the vendor, and it automatically shows you everything that's outstanding with this vendor. So I could say, this bill includes this thing, reconcile the total amount. And it's the same general idea. We just push it right to QuickBooks for you. And it'll close out that purchase order since everything that was on that PO has been closed out.
Can you do partial, receive partial POs and backorder stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. You can do partial payment on bills as well, and you can do that in QuickBooks or Knowify, and it'll reconcile the other software.
Awesome.
So that's how we do all of our expense tracking, as far as materials, subcontractor work, that kind of stuff. When it comes to labor costs, our time tracker can be as simple as a timesheet where my foreman Paul comes in, everything he's scheduled on shows up, and you can just say, on Wednesday I worked 8 hours, submit, pretty standard. But we also have the ability to use this foreman view where he can say, this is the project I'm on, and it's going to say, okay, John's supposed to work with you, Ringo's supposed to work with you, and you can enter time, per job instead of per employee, just a bit of a time saver.
Interesting. Quick question on the time tracking app. One thing that I did notice is that saving and submitting sends it on to whoever's going to review the time, but when something is saved as a draft, it does not actually populate the budget information in the contract area.
Correct. Correct.
Okay, so I wasn't crazy. That was real. And then the other question would be is what if somebody saves and submits time, but then they messed up, like they entered 6 hours when they meant to enter 10? Can that be captured at the review line, or do they have the opportunity to remove that?
So I think once you submit, you don't have the ability to call back your time and submit it again.
Okay.
But in review time, if you can contact whoever's in charge of your timesheet, then whoever is in charge will be able to see whatever you wrote in as a description of your service, and they can edit it for you. So, let's say Ringo actually spent 10 hours on this site. Whoever's in charge can say, all right, we'll push 10, and that's going to show up on the timesheet and in the project plan for you.
Got it.
So I can, choose the items that I want to approve, and when I approve these time entries, if you use QuickBooks for payroll, we'll send these right to the corresponding QuickBooks employee. But if you have a third-party company that does your payroll, or just someone who's going to handle it, and you just send them an Excel sheet, once or twice a month, then we have the option to print out a payroll report, which will give you a spreadsheet that says this guy, this many hours on this day for this job. And it'll break everything down for you like that, and it'll even tell you your overtime hours per each day as well. So if that's something you need the payroll company to see, it's absolutely possible.
Could you pull that same report like on a monthly, can you customize the time period so if you want to do multiple pay periods?
Yeah, you can set up, we can customize things a variety of different ways.
Okay.
And so you can do, so here's kind of the idea.
Okay.
And then you can customize these if you have to.
Perfect.
And so that's the basics of Knowify job costing. When I come back to my plan attraction section now, I can see that the jobs cost me $7,500 out of $23,000. It breaks down to materials, labor, and sub for me. I can say view current cost and see this broken down into some more details. This is how much I've spent on this phase, the materials and labor in this phase. Here are the relevant purchase orders. Here's how much I spent on each employee. I can come down to my subcontractor's phase and see how much I've spent on him versus his contract value. If he submits a change order, I can increase the contract value. And so now that we did all of our cost tracking, you've seen how that stuff works. So I'll get into the revenue side of things. And the first thing I'll do is submit a change order, where I can come to this schedule of invoiceable values, and I can say add a change order. You can say, change order, example, and I could say, we're going to add $1,200 to this, and I can do the same thing where I add comments, a bill of materials, and I can send it out for e-signature so we get approval before we try to invoice any of the value of this change order. I'll just make it active since you saw how the e-signature process works. But essentially, once this is active, I'll be able to include this in one of my invoices. So the last thing I'll do here is, I can see my value of the contract, and then I've invoiced $0. So I'll say invoice now, and it pulls in all of those line items, and it prompts me for a percentage of completion on them. So I can say, phase 1 is 100% complete. Our subcontractor is halfway done with his work. I want to invoice 100% of my change order. I can also say, apply one value to all of these. So let's just say you were in a situation where you wanted to submit a 25% deposit on all of these items. Then I can say, 25% invoice to start the project. We can also do this with dollar values if we need to. And when I confirm, I can merge all of these into one item by creating a group. I can just call this initial deposit. And now this is part of my invoiceable value. If I need to
that's a really neat feature.
Something, yeah, it's handy to have. And that's what I'll say, but we want 100% of the change order. So 1,000% doesn't quite make sense. And now this is a separate value. I can pull in my tax rate from QuickBooks. And when we verify and finalize an invoice, we can email it to a client, but it also sends to QuickBooks the same way our bills do, because they're synced in both directions. And so you can record payment, if you have merchant services built into your QuickBooks Online account, and you want to be able to receive your payment via credit card right into QuickBooks, it'll come back to the Knowify invoice and close it out for you, so you know that this is no longer an outstanding value. And we also create this invoice document for you, and this is another thing that we're happy to customize. And so you see, our initial deposit of $8,600, our change order for $1,200. It has all my information, total tax. We can also, I don't know if you saw at the bottom there, I can see the current balance of this and current payments. So if you've been receiving partial payments, you can keep sending these out to show the new balance. And so now this is tracked as revenue on the job, so I can come back to contract job, come to 123 Avenue A demonstration, and let's see. Hopefully my invoice came across. It doesn't take a little extra time. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes my profit or my revenue takes an extra couple seconds to log against the job, but you get the idea.
Sure.
We get a profit and loss statement based off of our invoice versus all of these costs that we've logged.
Really quickly, while we're on the invoice concept, I think we talked a while back about the idea of when you have an invoice that you don't have time to set up an estimate for. And I think you had said something about in the schedule, or not the scheduling, but in the
dispatch.
Dispatch. Now, one thing that I noticed after we had that conversation is literally the next day I had a client say that they wanted to bill a somewhat larger job without creating an estimate. Apparently, the guy who had gone out to do it just said, "Forget it, let's do it right now," and it ended up being like a $3,000 or $4,000 job, but it was just done on the fly, basically. And
well,
I'm wondering, like,
sorry to interrupt. I mean, I would still recommend, honestly, that someone makes a contract. It's not super necessary, but it is, it's, essentially what you would do is, if you have a lump sum, just come in, make a quick contract for that value, and then send out the invoice of 100% of the job.
right.
Not super necessary, though, because you have the option to, in your invoices, say, sorry, let me come in through. So you're like the manually way of adding an invoice. I can say add new, and say if you're trying to add a new invoice for multiple jobs, click here. And now instead of choosing a client, instead of choosing a job, you choose a client. So I could say I'm sending an invoice to this company.
Right.
Manual items, the apply invoice for $3,000, and now I can create an invoice without a contract associated with it. It's a little shaky, but it is an option.
Okay, so I mean, in some ways, I'm thinking about this because this came up before you guys did the new interface with your contract jobs, and my thought is, so let's say that somebody didn't create their proposal, they didn't get it signed off on, and they just started to work, and now you're kind of coming in after the fact to basically they call you up and say, I just need an invoice for this. Now what I'm hearing, though, is that what we could do is go into contract jobs and jump in as a simple, say, under a contract, and just create one phase, populate all the expense and work, etc., as just one giant phase, and then push that through to an invoice.
Exactly. So I'll just show you to get an idea of what simple mode does. When I save a simple mode job, you see plan and track is actually locked. What I want to do is just say, here's my contract sum for, $3,500, make it active. And now my plan and track is going to be unlocked, but there's just going to be the one phase called labor and materials for me to allocate my costs to. So I can send out a $3,500 invoice. This took me how many seconds just to set this up, so I can invoice it now. And I have a plan and track section to allocate all my costs to.
That's nice.
Okay. So the other question there is that when you create an invoice out of that area from these simplified ideas, will it be able to break out material and labor separately if you've tracked those things?
If you make it one line item when you're building the contract, it's going to invoice as one line item. But if you had built the contract by saying, instead of contract sum, you said, labor, 1,500, add new, material, 2,000, then you can invoice like that instead. And when I make this active, my plan and track is still just going to be the one phase either way.
Got it. I guess what I'm getting at is where, like, we have people who their contracts require that you list the materials individually on the invoice. And I was wondering if on a bill, say, I went through and I had 20 items on that bill, and then I paid it for that client, is there a way that I can translate those individual items onto an invoice for that client? Or is that more of a cost?
No, I mean, that's also an option. I mean, you can reference, if you have them in your catalog, you can say add catalog item, say one of these, add item, one of these, and then you can adjust quantities. We actually use 50 of these. We can create an invoice like that as well.
Okay, but not for like on-the-fly items, not like uncatalogued. Like I couldn't use the description field of the bill to populate the invoice.
You could do multiple lines.
Manual item, on-the-fly item, and then we also kind of like we group the other items to make a deposit and then hide them. We also have the option to group these and say don't hide them. Materials. And then on my invoice document, I'll be able to see materials and then all my different items, quantities, and prices.
Can you just show the items and the quantities and only show a group price?
What we could do is only show the subtotal of the invoice.
That
I don't
works.
know if we could only show the, yeah.
The subtotal works. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. So like, let's say that and I'm sorry to beleaguer the point, it's just one of those things that it tends to come up is,
yeah, we can.
Oh, that's cool. If I had, say, a client, I had 20 items, I entered them on a bill, they weren't in my catalog, I had the descriptions at the bill level, and then I went to create an invoice based on all the material, just let's say just the material that I got. Could I translate all the items that I listed on the bill onto the invoice without having catalog items? Like, can I reference that bill and its description?
So like the bill that you logged against the job?
Exactly. The bill that I logged in for materials that I bought for that job.
So what we can set up is time and materials jobs.
Okay.
So, and what that essentially does is for every different item that you log as a cost to this job, we drop it on the invoice for you.
Okay.
Is that more along the lines of what you're looking for?
Well, it's interesting. The kind of job I'm talking about is where basically what the person does is that they look at the job, they bid it, roughly bid it, basically, at like, okay, this is going to be $10,000. When they do their progress invoicing, but when they do their progress invoicing, they're showing all labor and all material, like each individual line item of material and labor, because that's what this type of clientele expects. So I mean, I'm guessing that maybe what it is if it's not capable of doing that, that probably what it would be is that the bid would be created or something like that, and then a time and material idea would be done. Does that make sense? I mean, I know it's a little
So it's a lot of on-the-fly items is what I'm hearing, Mike, is that right?
Exactly. It's
okay.
A ton of on-the-fly items, but it starts with the idea of, oh, this will cost $10,000. Then the progress invoices are not bulk items there. It's okay, here's all the labor that went towards this portion of the project pay us on this. Here's all the material that went towards this portion of the project, pay us on that.
Can you start simple and make it become more advanced later?
That is something that we try to keep people from doing.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the way our modes work out, if you tried to switch from simple to advanced, it would kind of jumble things up. Since we have everything allocated to one phase, once we start adding an additional phase in, we don't know how to divide up all that stuff that's already been costed.
So the reason for these questions, which makes a lot of sense, is the concept of path of least resistance. Obviously, as accountants, we're not the people that are out there bidding the jobs or in front of the customers, being busy doing 12 things at once. So we tend to find that people will try to do something and do a quick bid with nothing in it, but then later on they're going to want to be able to put extra detail and extra information into it. Is that possible that way? What would you suggest?
Sorry, I'm not sure I 100% followed. So.
No problem. The sales guy that's going out to bid a job, he's going to do whatever is the quickest possible. So if he can just do a real quick person's name, address, and a one-liner description with a total amount, that's what they're going to create a bid proposal on if they're out at that person. But now the manager gets the information and he sees the bid, but he's like, great, this is good. I'm glad you got the proposal. Now we need to actually see all the details. So it's that follow-up of still being able to get the info.
So I'll propose two different things here. The first option is just that. I mean, if he's creating the proposal in the field, but you just want the project plan to end up being more advanced than what he created, you can still use professional mode and start by creating the contract. That's actually still an option. Then you can go back and edit the project plan to be as advanced as you want it to be. But if all he's doing in the field is kind of talking shop, getting measurements, getting general ideas out, what we generally recommend you do is have it set up as a dispatch job at that point, where essentially what you do is you say, you know, add a new service. You can add the new client if it's like a call-in situation right here. Send it to the address, and you can say you can have a service in your system called measurements or estimating for just $0. And then you schedule who the worker is on this, and this is communicatable. So you can upload images and text and stuff like that. And now you have this, you know, dispatch job that has all the information. So when you create the contract job, you can get more specific when you have time and you're in the office.
So that'd be perfect for service. That's great for service call. You go out to see why something's not working, and it turns into a job. That's perfect.
Exactly. And then we meant to release with this past release, but we hadn't tested it enough. But we have the ability to, when you're finished with a service ticket, say, now turn it into a job. And it automatically pulls in those images into a contract job, and it starts you right at the contract creation screen from there.
We hope you guys enjoyed the video demo that Terrin with Knowify put on for us. We really can't thank him enough. Knowify is a wonderful company. They've been very, very supportive with us in the growth of our firm, and just always willing to go above and beyond, help take care of our clients as well as us. So we can't put enough positive words towards them. So if you guys are looking for a software for a contracting business, we strongly recommend Knowify. If you've got additional questions or looking for some advice, feel free to leave a comment below or reach out to us directly at info@parkwaymail.com. And as always, here's wishing you a very successful week.